I got red painted toenails. I told him I'm Team Canada right down to my toes. I think the threat from the United States is one that is existential for some provinces. I don't know about you, I've doubled my beef consumption, is the one with the credibility to take us there. So if you can, anything you can do to help get him over the finish line. Yeah, why are we still here? Why aren't we all at our door knocking, right? I think that the main thing is hold politicians to their promises. We're hearing a lot of promises during this election campaign. I think we all know you're not going to be surprised who I'm voting for, but we're hearing a lot of promises coming from other political parties because they're trying to capture the mood. The mood right now is to be on Team Canada. The mood right now is to fight for Canada. And I think after the election is over, we've got to make sure that there isn't any regression, that there isn't any of, oh, I told you that just to get elected and now we're not going to act on it. We have to act on it. This is our time, and it's a very narrow window to be able to lock in, I think, on this national consensus. And so just make sure that you're making the phone calls, especially to your friends in Ontario and Quebec. For those of you who are from Alberta, I know that they've got an Alberta corner here, but make sure everyone knows that this is a really important election. And I think that Pierre Poilievre, quite frankly, is the one with the credibility to take us there. So if you can, anything you can do to help get him over the finish line, I think that now's the time.
It was a bit of a rah-rah Canada speech there. I heard you didn't like us anymore.
I showed Brian my latest manicure. I got red painted toenails. I told him I'm Team Canada right down to my toes.
So that was an inspiring speech for what the future of Canada holds. Pierre Poilievre's out there campaigning right now, not to turn this into partisan, although it's a conservative audience, but he's saying we could be the richest nation on earth.
Yeah.
How much do you think, as you talked about all those projects, we know that we're about 20% per capita lower than the US in terms of our per capita GDP.
Yeah.
Would we be wealthier than the Americans if we did the things you were talking about there?
I think there's no doubt about it. When you look at the value proposition that we have to the Americans, so much of it is that we have all of the critical minerals, all the raw resources that they need to turn into value-added products. And so if we take a view of Fortress North America, and I include Mexico in that there really is nothing that we can't do together. So I would say that whether we build out our own prosperity by continuing to rely on our traditional trading partners, whether we tear down the trade barriers and start trading more with each other, whether we find new markets, or all three.
I'd say all three.
No question in my mind that we'd be able to bridge that gap very quickly.
In terms of refining capability, right now we ship south because of a lack of other alternatives, but we also have not increased refining capability. Is that something that you're working on as Premier to get more refineries in Alberta, or does it just make more sense to ship it to Asia, to ship it to the United States?
Well, I think we need to do more processing, generally speaking. I mean, one of the things that I think we should be alarmed by about China's dominance in critical minerals is that they really have locked up not only the raw materials but also the processing capability. And part of the reason is that they've subsidized it so heavily that they've made it uneconomic in our countries to do that kind of processing. But we have to invest in that, because otherwise we'll be completely dependent on Chinese supply chains for some of these critical minerals. So I think we have a big opportunity there. What we've learned when it comes to refining is that it makes the most sense to refine closest to the market where your product is going to. So it makes sense for Alberta to produce it, but it makes more sense for Sarnia to refine it, or for refineries in Quebec to be able to refine it. So it could well be that if we can find a pathway to an energy east, whether for oil or
more refineries in Canada, but not necessarily in Alberta.
Yeah, I would say that's again the value proposition that we have. If we can develop it in Alberta, put pipeline in the ground using Quebec and Ontario steel, and then be able to have refining capacity closer to the market on the East Coast, that's probably the best way that we can leverage our respective strengths. I would say there's been a change, and this is, I think, what I hope will persist. We'll see what happens on the election on April the 28th, but there has been a change among the premiers in realizing that we have to support one another. I think the threat from the United States is one that is existential for some provinces, and maybe existential for the country if you hear some voices, and that's why we've realized that Canada is an act of will, and if we want to survive and be stronger, we're stronger together, and we have to support each other. And so I think that has been a reversal in the thinking from the past 4 months, because I think we always took it for granted that we'd always have that free access to the U.S. market going north-south, and we didn't have to worry about trading east-west. I would say that's over, and that is also a lesson from history. After the 1890 tariffs, sure enough, that's exactly what happened, is Canada looked to trade more with Britain, and so we ended up increasing our trade ties with our European allies. And I suspect you're going to see the same on both sides, that both increasing our access to markets in Asia as well as increasing our access to markets in Europe. And I don't think that is going to change. It just is a matter of how quickly can we get there. Because I can tell you, again, when we built the Trans-Canada main line, it took 2 years to do. And now it takes 10 years to get a permit. So that's what's going to have to change. How is it that we were able to build massive infrastructure projects in a year or 2 or 3, 100 years ago, and yet we can't even get through a regulatory process in that same amount of time? And that, I think, has got to be the act of will on the part of all the governments to address that.
I've never understood why Canadian beef isn't sold around the world as Canadian beef. A lot of what we produce ends up in American slaughterhouses. It shows up as product of America. Is now the time, and you've got a lot of ranchers in your province, is now the time to make the world say, oh, Canadian beef or Alberta beef, that's the best stuff, I got to get it, instead of Australian or Japanese, what have you?
I think there always is that opportunity. I mean, I don't know about you, I've doubled my beef consumption. Yeah. I have half a cow being delivered on Sunday. I can hardly wait. I'm sure. Yeah, it's going to be some heavy beef happening over the course of the next year. But we do also, this is, I guess, one of the issues that we have as a country, really, is that we have been accustomed to providing the raw materials, and that includes cattle and grain, and then it gets upgraded in the United States. So it would take some effort for us to develop those new trade lines. That's why I'm saying that it's got to be all of the above. We've got to maintain a strong relationship with our U.S. counterparts, and quite frankly, at the moment, it looks like we're going to have an early renegotiation of the Canada-U.S. Free Trade Agreement. That is positive. I haven't heard the U.S. president say anything about stopping beef going across the border, so maybe the message has gotten through there. But if you look at as well the opportunity that we have in Asia, I think this will be a good conversation for you to have with Scott Moe tomorrow. Scott has done an incredible amount of work of getting product into the international markets. I think he said that he is one of the least dependent on north-south trade, that he has far more of his product going internationally than any other province. And it's because of the fact that he does international trade missions, that they do have offices internationally, as do we. And I think that there's a real model for us to continue doing that. So whether it's going to be our beef or our pork or our canola or other grain products, I really believe that now is the time for us to take advantage of those trade partnerships. The world does want to have more Canadian product. You may have heard a former prime minister say that there's no business case. When people come knock on our doors, say, do you want to trade with us? Well, there is a business case, but it's going to be up to each of the provinces, I think, to go out and do those kinds of missions, bring the business community along with them, and for us to just realize that we are a pretty special place. We have everything that the world wants, and we've got to go out there and make sure that they know that we're prepared to do trade with them.